Hey, folks, in this episode of the podcast, I sit down with my friend, Mr. Jake Hicks. He has some interesting observations about using LED or continuous lighting versus strobe. This is TWiP. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, Jake Hicks is joining us from across the pond to share some insights that he recently discovered around LED lighting versus strobe lighting, and I think you will find the discussion illuminating. Jake Hicks, welcome
Wow.
to the show.
Wow.
You know I had to do it.
Never gets old, man. Like,
It's dad humor, man. Come on.
brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out, man. It's always
Always a pleasure,
chatting.
man. Yeah, it's been too long, but yeah, it's definitely good to be back. Yeah.
No, it's good. We have so much to talk about. I mean, a ton to catch up on. But in this interview, I want to focus it. And here's another one. I want to focus it on LED lighting. You and I were talking before I started recording about some discoveries and some eyebrow raising discoveries that you made with regard to LEDs and in your particular brand of photography, which is very colorful, using complementary gels and all the things. You're like the gel master, in my book. You understand that stuff intrinsically.
I've been doing it a long time. Yeah.
You have, and admittedly, you are obsessively self-described and obsessive about color. Right, so
Sure.
things coming out of your mouth that has a lot of weight when you talk about color. Let's talk about it. Before we dive into that, let's set the stage for folks that may not have been exposed to. There's another photography thing. Folks that may not. I'm going to keep it going. They may not have been exposed to Jake Hicks and the Jake Hicks way of shooting. Who is Jake Hicks? And why have you found yourself shooting this way for so many years?
Yeah, a portrait fashion editorial shooter over here in London, UK, or just outside London, UK. And yeah, I mean, I've been shooting for over 20 years now. Yeah, well over 20 years now. So,
wow.
Started off, for my sins on, in film, even shot, weddings on film all those years ago. And, seen a lot of changes in that time for sure. And, you mentioned LEDs and that sort of thing. And I think that this is another one of those sort of changes that I think will certainly stick around for sure. But my work, is definitely known for being very bright, bold, colorful, highly saturated, and as you say, I've been using color gels now for many years, and it's interesting to see where color gels have come as well. I know everybody and their grandmother uses color gels now, but you gotta remember that 10 years ago when I was doing it, everybody thought I was bloody crazy. I remember doing like a lighting demo on stage. I think gels have had an interesting history as well, because everybody shoots gels now. Everybody and their grandmother is out there taking colored photo shots, which is amazing. But you got to remember, like 10 years ago when I was first doing this, it was everybody thought I was crazy. I remember doing a lighting demo on stage for Bowens all those years ago, and doing one on stage, and like people would literally queue up at the end of it to come and tell me how I ruined the image with the colored lights. It's like, why have you made that girl bright blue? Like, what's wrong with you? You totally ruined that shot. Whereas now, like nobody thinks twice about seeing a girl with colored lighting on it, but back then it was definitely not as popular. So it's certainly come a long way for sure. Yeah.
Your work is, it's beautiful. Everything's subjective, and it definitely speaks to the aesthetic that I find beautiful, because beautiful subjects, of course. The lighting is always just stunning. Your post-processing is on point always, right? So it all comes together, and like you said, that saturated kind of look, I gravitate towards that. I like that hyper realism that you put into your work. Have you, the style that you developed over time, was it like, okay, I just feel drawn to bright colors, or was it inspired by another photographer, or was it, how did it kind of come to be? How did it gel?
It's criminal, man. Absolutely.
I can't help it.
Absolutely, you should be fined. It's kind of a weird one, really. It's, long story short, like I said, freelance 20 years ago. Then digital cameras came along. It became pretty tricky to make a living taking pictures back then for the same money that we were making, because everybody had a digital camera and was like, well, I don't need a professional photographer. My Uncle Jeff's daughter's neighbor has got a digital camera and that's really good, so we don't need a professional photographer. So I took a couple of years out of shooting and then came back to it. And when I came back to it, I actually started working full-time in a studio, and that studio was terrible pay, but you were shooting all the time, and it was like, right, Monday morning, right, Jake, you're in Studio 1 photographing a front cover for a yoga book. Jake, you're in Studio 2 photographing a family, corporate headshot, that sort of thing. And it was a very, very busy studio at the time, and it, like, most of what we were doing was white background stuff, like white background, like high key, which is just mind numbing. Like, my mum could shoot that. It's not typical. So like the clients would come in and, can we get this like high key shot? I was like, yeah, it's fine. And I would do that for them. And then I would go, look, are you happy with what we've got? Would you mind if we did something a little bit more creative? Because I think this would work really well with the jacket that you're wearing or your hair or just whatever it was to make them feel good about it. But and then it gave me a chance to sort of play with the colored lighting and that sort of thing. But it really was, the colored lighting came from a little bit of a rebellion, really, of like, I'm going to lose my mind in this studio if I don't do something creative. I'm absolutely not going to make it through the day.
It must have color.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just, I wanted to do something creative and playing with the colors. And, like, people would come in and ask for the white background stuff. And then over time, people would be like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't realize you could do that. And they would end up leaving with the colored stuff. And then come on, a little bit more time, and people were ending up actually coming in and asking for the colored gel stuff. And then one thing led to another, and then thanks very much, I've made a name for myself with this style, and now I'm out of here, thanks very much. And the freelance is history, as it were. So
the work is beautiful. I mean, it's stunning. People will look at it, and of course I'll have a gallery of your work on the blog post for this, but yeah, people should head over to your websites, jakehicksphotography.com, correct?
Perfect. Yeah.
Just head over there and check it out, and just prepare to be stunned by the beauty that's on the front of that page. For the photographers that are interested in this, right? The looking at the color wheel, the Roy G. Biv color wheel, right? When you remember that, when you look at it, tell me if I'm incorrect, right? So part of the principle or one of the principles in using color gels is complementary colors, right? To kind of cancel colors out, or putting a gel or a filter on the camera and then flashing a complementary color. So anything that is hit by the flash appears normal, but things that are not, i.e. the ambient, goes whatever the color was. Is that kind of in the basic ballpark?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to it, and I think that for the most part, I mean, look, I thought I was pretty good at studio lighting for many, many years, and it wasn't until I started to use colored lights that I was like, wow, my lighting is very sloppy. It's terrible, really. Because when you're using white light, you got your key light, you got your fill light, you got your hair light, you got your background light. Cool, well, that's really nice, corporate headshot looking good, but they're just 4 white lights. Like, you can't, they're all overlapping and laying on top of one another and merging, but because they're all the same color, you definitely get away with it. Now, with colored lights, you can't do that. You can't overlap them. And the reason for that, and this is kind of counterintuitive to the way that we were taught color theory, if you like. When we were kids, like we were maybe in like play school or something like that, and we would have the paints and we'd mix the paints together. And if you remember all that way back there, Frederick, if you remember all those years ago, then the more paints you mix together, the closer you get to this muddy purpley color. So that's actually the opposite of what happens when we start to use colored gels or colored lights, because the more colored lights you mix together, the closer you get to white. Okay, if you remember like science class, if you take your prism and fire white light through it, you get the rainbow that comes out. So white light essentially is a rainbow of color, okay? And when all those rainbow colors are combined, you get white. And the same thing is happening when you layer your colored gels or your colored lighting. So the more colored lights you overlap, the closer you actually get to white light. And this is why people struggle with gel lighting when they start out, because they don't have proper control of the lights. And without that proper control, the colors start to get washed out and they just look insipid and, very sort of deep, just not nice. And this is because you're overlapping multiple colored lights. So for me, the biggest learning experience was really trying to control the light, changing the modifiers that I was using, changing the way that I control the light to get these rich colors, and really place the lights exactly where I wanted. Yeah,
it's interesting. So I'm remembering back from photography learning, right? So there's additives and subtractive, I think is what you're talking about. And then also the whole idea that white, like you were saying, white, or the color white, is the equal combination of all colors, and black is the absence of all color. Right. So you're understanding those principles and the overlaying and all that. And then, of course, having talent to actually to use those techniques properly is where the rub is. Right. So is that close?
But, I mean, like, no, yeah, absolutely right. And there is like there's a few like weird things that kind of happen. I mean, well, as we know, like RGB, right? Red, green, and blue is our kind of primaries, because when we mix RGB, we get the white like that. That's how our monitors work. And there are a couple of weird things that happen, like complementary colors, like when you mix orange and blue, for example, they will cancel each other out. So you get this gray light. I know you can't have a gray light, but you have the absence of color. Yeah. But if you mix other complementary colors, like I don't know, like I think green and red, if you mix those, you get yellow, which is like weird. So like, you know, so there are bizarre sort of happenings that go on when you start to mix colored light that is only present with colored light. That's not how normal colors mix, especially not how paints mix and that sort of thing. So, you know, and you can use that to your advantage. You know, you can certainly shine red and green onto the subject. And, you know, I've certainly got shots where I've done that, and then you have this beautiful yellow in the middle where these two lights merge. So you can certainly use that to your advantage. But you're right, there is weird rules that go on with colored lighting for sure. Yeah.
It's those rules, and you know. You should teach this stuff. I'm telling you. So.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, I should do something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later. Yeah, I'm interested. One of the other things is that there's I don't know if this is a myth or if this was reality, but if photographers want to start experimenting with different colored backgrounds, the running knowledge is go get yourself a gray background and a set of color gels, and now you have all the colors that you can use. Is it there's some truth to that?
This is one of those bloody YouTube myths that drive me around the bend. Yeah, it's so the reason why people say this, or you should use like a gray backdrop when you're using colors, because you get this really rich color from it. It's true, but the reason it's true is because you're kind of underexposing that colored light as a general guide. And again, this is why color gels are hard to use, is because you can't really use a light meter, because the light meter is just seeing in gray, right? So it's not telling you what the best color is. For example, if you just use an orange gel, you can have a fairly bright orange gel and you get this beautiful sunburst yellow color, or you have an underexposed orange gel and you get this rich sort of orangey ochre color. None of those are necessarily wrong, or so the light meter can't tell you what color you're after, right? So this is where people struggle a little bit. As a base rule, usually the darker the color or the darker the light power that you're putting through the gel, the stronger or the richer the color that you get. With the reds and the blues, you get these gorgeous saturated colors, and that's when the light is slightly underexposed. So if you use a gray background, you just automatically underexpose the shot immediately. It just automatically looks good straight away. The issue happens is when you start to use other colors. It's all right well using reds and and blues and that sort of thing, but when you come to use like a yellow gel, for example, like the whole theory falls apart. If you it'd be like a watercolorist using gray paper. It's not going to work, right? You're just going to shine yellow on gray, and it's like, that's still kind of gray, muddy. No, it needs to be white. So try and stick at it and try and make it work with a white background, and just underexpose your lights. Don't use a gray background.
Oh my God. Yeah. See, that's what it takes, just to have someone who is intimate and knowledgeable with the technique to just explain the bullshit, right? It's like,
I can say I've been doing it a long time.
All you had to do is say watercolor. Get some gray construction paper and a set of watercolor paints, and then get a white piece of paper, right?
How's that yellow looking good? Yeah.
That's fantastic. Good. So let's transition into in the beginning we were talking about LED versus strobe, right? And you've been experimenting with LED light, and you made some surprising discoveries. Can you describe that a little?
Yeah. So look, I mean, I've been shooting strobes for like 20 years. So I was, when people were talking about LEDs recently, I know LEDs have been around for years and that sort of thing, but, you know, I've been very hesitant with using them. And I think, I don't know, like 9 months ago or something, I was down for a meeting in a studio. And at this meeting, there was a LED company called Rotolight, and they were there doing a presentation at the time, and I was like, yeah, you know, do your thing with your silly little lights, and you know, I'll wait. And you know, I was watching it with these lights, and I was just like, I can't argue with how beautiful that light looks. That's like, that's, you know, I can't deny that. So, you know, I had a little play, and the you know, the guy that was there, Rod, his name was, who was actually the CEO of Rotolight, was like, look, just try it. Because I was firing away all my nerdy questions, all my lighting questions. I was like, yeah, I'll catch you out with these, you know, questions. So I was giving him my best shot with, you know, what's the power of this, and what is it at this Kelvin, and all that sort of thing. And he had all the answers, but he was like, look, Jake, just try it. Just try it. See for yourself. So I managed to get hold of a few of these lights and played with them, and I genuinely was blown away with what they could do, and more importantly, like the quality of the light that they gave. And I'm happy to talk about that here if you want to get nerdy about it.
Yeah, let's get nerdy. Let's get dirty. Yeah, do it.
Yeah. So one thing that is immediately different for us, those of us using speed lights or strobes and that sort of thing, is we're used to the light coming from a central point, right? It's coming from this bulb in the middle, and then light is spreading out. And, you know, we'll be used to the inverse square law of how light falls off and that sort of thing. And that's great. But when we start to then modify that, let's say with a softbox, like we put our softbox on our strobe, whatever it is, we're always going to have a hotspot. And I mean, I haven't used a softbox as a key light for years and years and years. I hate it because of this hotspot. It gives a very unflattering light when it's moved in quite close. So when I'm setting like this softbox may be like arms reach away, so you're always going to have that hotspot. And you can test it yourself. You can go home, you know, put your strobe, put your softbox on there, and fire it against a white wall, and you'll immediately see that it fades off immediately to shadow, like instantly. Like there's no nice circle. It instantly starts to fade off. If you wanted to avoid that with strobes, just use something like a beauty dish that has this diffusion cone that spreads the light more evenly, and you have a more even spread of light. Now, what's interesting about this is that the LED panels, and I am talking about panels, I'm not talking about the little, you know, whatever it is, the little things that you, basically it has to be a decent size, like, you know, 12-inch sort of size panel and that sort of thing for, you know, for this to work. But now we have this wall of light. And actually, I can show you this if you're on my screen here. Just give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, let's make that.
Yeah, so...
And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, there's a reason for you to go to the website or to the YouTube channel to see this demo that Jake's pulling together.
Okay, so I got a couple of slides here. The reason I got a couple of slides here is I am going to do a talk for Rotolight on Saturday. And when I was asked to do this talk, I was like, you know, sure, I can do that. So, but, you know, I went away and sort of played with these lights and experimented with them. And these are some of the things that I sort of found that I thought pretty interesting. And I'm sure, you know, I'm a member of your TWiP community. I know that you've got a lot of lighting nerds in there as well. So I'm sure you guys will find this interesting as well. But
yeah,
like I was saying about the panels, like these LED panels, they're a larger sort of sheet or wall of light that comes out. And one thing that I found was when you use that on a subject like real close, like the quality of light that you got on the skin was absolutely beautiful. Like the drop off of light was absolutely gorgeous. And people use that term quality of light. They're just, you know, bounding it around like, you know, oh yeah, the quality of light was, you know, was lovely. Oh, I love the lights. You know, the quality is beautiful. Like, what does that really mean? And you know, I'll give my sort of explanation as to what that is. But for me, like the most beautiful light, and look, I'm a strobist, have been for 20 years, but even I know that the quality of daylight is unsurpassed. Like the quality of the light when it hits the skin, if you're photographing somebody outside in natural light, very, very difficult to beat it or even come close to it in the studio. And one of the reasons for that is just purely because of the size of the sun is so big that the rays that are hitting us are just a small fraction of the surface area of the sun. As a result of that, you get what's called collimating light rays, which is basically parallel lines of light. So it's a very clean light that has this very clean drop off and shadow attached to it, as opposed to what I was saying to you before about a flash bulb being spreading light everywhere from a central point. The rays come out like this, right, in this sort of diagonal lines, whereas sunlight is coming at us parallel like this. So for me, that's sort of my reasoning for liking like the quality of light from the sun. And for us in lighting, we have a couple of other elements that do that, with like a Fresnel lens collimates the light. Those of you that don't know, a Fresnel lens is that sort of ridged lens that you get on like cinema sets or like stage lighting and that sort of thing. And long story short, Mr. Fresnel was a French lighthouse keeper hundreds of years ago, and he had his little candles up in his little tower, and he was like, the ships were still crashing on his rocks, and he's like, how can I make my 3 candles brighter? And the way that he did it was, rather than making like the candles brighter, he would collimate the light. So he would take the light that he had and focus it into this beam, like this column of light. And that's what the Fresnel lens, like the beautiful piece of glass lens that he came up with, was doing, was sending the light out in these parallel lines. And we know from like the Hollywood lighting of like the 50s, 60s, and that sort of stuff, like they loved those Fresnel lenses. This is a time before Photoshop, remember. This is a time when we had, we were making the skin looking beautiful, this porcelain skin, and they may be using these Fresnel lenses on their lights as well. And in the studio, the more modern studios, we have something called parabolic reflectors or parabolic umbrellas. They're super expensive, but they can be, some of them are like 7-8 feet tall, but they can cost like, $10,000 or something like that. They cost a huge amount. And the reason being is because of their beautiful curve that they have, that again, like when you place the light at the back of that, all the light that is coming out of that bounces off this beautiful curve and comes out in these parallel lines. Again, this collimated light. And this is for anybody who's shooting fashion or full body fashion in any of these fashion houses. This is the closest that they get to bringing daylight indoors, is by using these massive parabolic umbrellas. And again, it's because it collimates the light. Get very clean shadows, very clean lighting. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about quality of light, and how I feel that some of that, some of these rays of light will look on the skin, and why it looks like that on the skin. And here we have like a regular strobe, like we all know a regular strobe, and as we can see, the light is emanating from a central point and coming out in this cone shape, so it's just spreading out everywhere. What this results in is slightly busy shadows, and just nowhere near as clean as if it was coming in parallel lines. And this is what LED panels are doing when we have a larger surface area. So, like, to be clear, I'm not saying that all the LEDs on this panel are collimating the light, but I am saying is when you have a miniature wall of light like this, that when you bring them in nice and close, you immediately get an absolutely gorgeous drop-off of light on the skin that enables you to get very, very clean colors, very, very close to the skin. Like, it drops off immediately, drops off because of how close you can get it, and you're able to have this beautiful quality of light on the skin, which was immediately noticeable to me. And again, like with softboxes, this would all be blown out, and it would be dark down here because of the hot spotting and the centralized point of light. So this is one of the things that sort of initially drew me to the LED lighting, for sure. Yeah.
One quick question before you go into this one, Jake. You mentioned that the idea of a softbox was repulsive to you. You're not using soft boxes, right? For the reasons that you're explaining here, which is blowing a lot of photographers' minds, I'm sure, because traditional thinking is the larger the light source, or like you were saying, the closer the light source to the subject, then the softer and more wrap around the light. With meaning the idea of an umbrella or a beauty dish like you're using, or a softbox, you get a big one, put it next to your model, and you get soft lighting, making her skin look better, reducing the appearance of micro shadows, i.e. on hair, and imperfections in the skin. How are you combating that by not using a softbox and using these columns of light? Or am I off base?
No. Yeah. So it's, and this won't be the same for everybody, because we kind of touched on this at the start, where I was like saying that I need to have a lot of control with my light so that my colored lights don't overlap. Because it's like here, for example, the image on screen at the moment, when we have, like I mentioned before about these complementary colors, orange and blue, when they mix, they neutralize it and become gray. So you end up with no color. So for me to be able to control the light in a small space, i.e. the human body, I need to bring my lights in quite close to the subject so that the light drops off very quickly. And when I say drop off, I mean like the power diminishes very quickly, right? So we're able to see this orange, and then it drops off to shadow, and then that leaves space for the blue to be present. So one rule of gelled lighting that I live by is you can only apply a gel to a shadow. Okay, if there's not a shadow there, you shouldn't be applying a gel to it, because you're just going to be mixing colors, and it's just going to become messy. So for me, the reason why I say about softboxes is because I have them quite close to my subject. You have this inherent hotspot, regardless of the panels in there as well. So if I'm using strobes, like you said, I would use a beauty dish or an umbrella, which bounces the light back into an umbrella and then out, which again sort of stops that hotspot from happening, which is kind of ironic because umbrellas cost like $6. Yeah. So like if you wanted a half decent modifier, really you really don't need to spend that much at all. Yeah.
You're decimating the whole light modifier market right now. Look at that.
Well, it's kind of weird, right? Because I think like softbox was invented to be this kind of window light simulation, and it's just because it's square and like rectangular. But that is like nobody ever put a subject next to a window and lit them, and then put them next to a softbox and was like, God, yeah, they're the same. It's not. It's not even remotely. No, it's not. So look, if you're using a softbox and it's working for you, that's absolutely fine. It's just for me, because I have my lights so close, I can't have those hot spots, or just being as present as they are. Yeah. So these panels really sort of reduce that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Just coming on from there, the other benefit of these lights was just the fact that we have a touchscreen on there that I can just access like millions of colors, which is like before I would have to get the tape out and shuffle through my gels and do that sort of thing. So just in terms of convenience as well, it's just huge, right? It's just being able to have the ability to choose any color I want instantly is incredible. Just going on from that, one of the other things, so I've done a few shoots with these lights now, and one of the other things I noticed was being able to dial in specific colors compared to the gels. So like here I've got this pink and blue background, and I'm able to basically dial in exactly the right pink and blue on my model, whereas normally I would get close with my gels, but it's not going to be bang on, right? So having that ability to really dial in the exact color you want for the scene that you're in, whether it could be styling, right? You want green light and she's wearing a green jacket, you can get exactly the right color, which is again quality of life,
Yeah.
As well, I mean, I'm using I'm using more sort of cinematic style lights in some of my more recent work, and one of those has been using tungsten lighting. So Kelvin is a huge factor in my work. I would put it up there. You've got aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. I honestly put Kelvin up there with the same value. In just in terms of how I see it when I'm taking an image, I always consider the Kelvin when I'm taking a shot. I certainly don't just switch my camera to the Thunderbolt and crack on. I definitely want to dial in the sort of Kelvin I'm after. And if you're doing something like this, where I've got like a light in shot with this specific bulb, she's not being lit by that. I have one of these Rotolights just off to one side here, and you're able to dial in like the exact Kelvin that you want. So again, it's just quality of life, being able to match the lights in scene specifically, just in terms of the Kelvin. There's not any gels on there, but in terms of being able to dial in the Kelvin that you want is really nice as well. We spoke about this shot before we jumped on, but I mentioned as well about pastels and softer colors. I think you mentioned this love of saturated colors, and I think we've seen a lot of that over the years, but I am seeing a little bit of a shift in the trend towards slightly softer colors, more of a lifted color palette, and like the superhero movies have done wonders for the saturated colors, right? Just in your face, just over the top.
Marvel.
Exactly right. And I do think we're kind of coming away from that a little bit at the moment into some of these softer tones. And here again, like with these lights, it's not just maximum saturation the whole time. I'm able to reduce the saturation. Like this may be like 78%, and then the pink may be like 56% or something like that. So like it's again having that fine control that with gels you can't you can't just make a pink gel, like a saturated pink gel. You can't just turn that into a pastel color. You actually have to get a pastel gel to be able to do it. But again, like the convenience of being able to dial in these things is huge for me as well. So again,
it's like trying to get nuances of color with a box of crayons, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you got your 12 colors, go for it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like having the ability to adjust and, you know, make slight adjustments to the overall saturation of the color is really nice, especially for these softer tones like this. And I don't think you can see it there, but, you know, on like here, you know, what I was talking about, this quality of light and how smooth this light is, you know, you can see that it's just, you know, the model is just being kissed by this light rather than it being too aggressive and having these hot spots. So it's really subtle, and it is one of those things where as soon as you start to use them, you're just like, you know, I can kind of see what you mean now. It is definitely one of those things where you have to sort of see it for yourself for sure.
You know, a question that I think will pop up is, this is great, but these LED lights are not going to have the power of strobe. Are you missing the output, the power output, and what are you giving up? You just need to use a camera that has a high ISO, or what? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it's a question that I get fired at a lot as well when I've spoken about these recently. Is, you know, like the power of them and that sort of thing. And yeah, you know, they are not as powerful as a strobe. You know, let's not beat around the bush. They definitely aren't. But I think if you're somebody who works in a controlled environment, and when I say like a controlled environment, like your living room or a studio and that sort of thing, where the light, you know, where you have control of the ambient light, it's not a problem at all. But you know, like, that being said, I mean, I've certainly used mine outdoors. I think I've got some shots here. So I mean, yeah, here you go. Like even this next one. So I'm using it out. This is a bright sunny day out here, and I am using them outdoors. Like, you know, here I'm adding, like, she's being lit by one of the Rotolights here, and I've just cranked up the Kelvin so that it's nice and warm and orange to fill it in. So I mean, I've used them outdoors. In the daylight, are they going to overpower the sun? No. But then I don't know who is trying to do that really, and what you're doing that for. But if you are trying to overpower the sun, then no. But can you use them in conjunction with the sun? Absolutely, yeah. And it is in another shot here with regards to me using it outdoors in daylight. So I've darkened like the daylight down, and then I've just brought in a couple of these LEDs, you know, here, and then one to camera right as well. And again, beautiful results with minimal effort. For sure.
Yeah. And it's a case of the right tool for the right job too, right? So why would you take LED lights to the beach to try to overpower the sun, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't. No, you're right. I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't. And like, I think as well, when people talk about, I mean, I'm the same. You know, I've still got my strobes here. I'm not going to sell those. You know, anytime soon. And I don't think it's a case of people going, oh, well, I just got to switch everything tomorrow. You know, if that's what we got to do. No, you know, you can just get one or two LEDs and augment them. You know, it's not like when mirrorless came along, where it's like, well, Christ, I have to get, if I get a mirrorless camera, then I got to get all mirrorless lenses and, you know, do that whole, you know, I got to switch everything. I think with this, which is what I'm doing, you know, is I'm just augmenting them with you know, strobes, right? So, you know, use them when it comes up, and if you need a strobe for a certain situation, then fine. Yeah, it's certainly not a case of jump ship and, you know, everybody on eBay selling their strobes at all, for sure. Yeah,
Excellent.
Yeah. One thing which I sort of spoke to you about was some of the other benefits as well. And these Rotolights enable me to use a flash. So you spoke about flash, like what can you do with flash and that sort of thing. And these Rotolights can flash the LEDs or pulse. I think they need to come up with their own word for it, really, but they pulse the LEDs. And if you want extra brightness, then the pulse is basically double the power or an extra stop of light. So you can get more power by actually using the flash mode in these. And the Rotolights are the only ones that can do it with the full RGB spectrum. But it has opened up a couple of interesting things that I was kind of curious about. And this shot here is using the flash and the ambient, right? So I'm using long exposure here. So it's like a 1 second exposure in this shot. So she's being flashed from above. And then we've got ambient red, you know, LED light around her, and that's what's creating this sort of fiery effect. So you have the ability to flash at the same time, which is crazy. One thing that I was kind of curious about when I was testing these, which I found really interesting, was when I was, using them as the flash and that sort of thing, was I had a theory as to how the flash on these LEDs was working. So those of you that may not be aware, but when you use a strobe, like a speed light or a flash, mainly like a strobe light, which has like this glass tube, basically that glass tube has xenon gas in it that gets ignited at one end, and it ignites around the tube, and then that explosion, if you like, dissipates. And what you end up with is this buildup of light that we see here, and then this as the flash reaches its peak, and then that gas sort of cools down, and then that light dissipates as well. So it's not this, like we imagine flash as being instant, which is not really. Like you have this build up and then this taper out of this explosion, as it were. And that whole time is producing light in your image with a regular flash tube. So I was like, well, obviously LEDs don't have that. So I was kind of, wondering how they worked. But if you were thinking about, well, surely flash duration is fast enough for what I need. I just did some tests here. This is just metal ball bearings bouncing on a metal plate with a strobe, and you can see like fast moving objects like this, are going to create these kind of tapers of light, or these slight movements of light, because like I said, that gas is still present in the image. And look, for portraits where the subject isn't moving at 100 miles an hour, you don't notice it. But for fast moving objects, you definitely want to be mindful of this flash duration. Mm-hmm. So for LEDs, then, if they don't have this gas igniting, it's just a switch, like a light switch at home. So you just turn it on and you turn it off. That's what that LED is doing. So this is the kind of bell curve when we're like, really, it's just literally off and on. There's no build up or taper off, which results in the flash being instantaneous, which results in your objects being frozen dead still, which is crazy to me. I was absolutely stunned because I had a theory that this is what it was doing, but it wasn't until I tested it I was like, holy shit, that's nuts.
Because it's not a combustion engine, it's binary, right? It's just it's on or off. Yeah, and this occurs to me, like, just as I think through this, as you're talking, I'm thinking if you introduce this LED or continuous lighting, or even the power to do continuous lighting, and with these Rotolights, you can, make them kind of behave like a strobe, but you're opening up all kinds of possibilities for video and motion type work. We're seeing a lot of like little shorts of I can imagine one of your pieces there, but slightly moving, or some silk blowing in the wind, and introducing all that stuff into it, right?
It's going to be the same color normally. Like when I do a shot like this one here, right? I got to go to the studio. I got to bring my strobes, and I got to bring my hot lights. So like my tungsten lights. So I got to bring the modifiers for both lights, and so I'm bringing like 4 lights for this, because I need hot lights for the ambient, for the long exposure, and then I need the flash to actually capture the subject, So whereas with the LEDs, it's just one light that does both. These will flash at the same color or color temperature, as well as, like RGB color if you want, as the ambient. So you can do interesting stuff that you couldn't do with flash before, because normally you flash and then the ambient is a different color, a different Kelvin. So the flash is a different Kelvin to the LED, to the tungsten. So with these, you can have this same color flash and ambient in the same shot, which is nuts. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's crazy. So at the end we'll get to it, but these these lights ain't cheap, right? So doing this level of work is a investment, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I guess you're right. It's a few months ago, I was asked by Panavision or Panelux, who do the lights, to do a lighting demo for them, and it's all relevant, right? Or it's all relative, right? Because like their panels were like 15 grand or something, or like 5 grand, and that's what some of their panels, like some of their LED panels, you couldn't even buy; you could only rent. So, but like they're being used on big movie sets and that sort of thing. So I do think it's relative, and I do think that we only started to use these strobes for cost as well. Like speed lights and that sort of thing is really a cost. Like we're always balancing between quality of light versus cost. And one of the things I always say to people starting out, I was like, it's great. I started using a speed light as well, but please, as soon as you can afford it, get a strobe. Like you'll see a huge benefit in your work instantly. Don't buy that lens. Just step up from a speed light to a strobe, and it'll just make your life so much easier. So I do think it's relative as to what you want to do and what you're prepared to do. And look, I would love those Panelux panels, but yeah, you're right. They're like 15 grand. I'm not going to get it, like regardless of how amazing I think they are. That's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Right. Wow, this is crazy now. So, okay, what else? Keep going. I have a bunch of questions, but I don't want to interrupt you.
I mean, the rest is just talking about the actual Neos and AOs that they're bringing.
Oh, the hardware.
Yeah. Because they all have so they got like color presets. So I've got my color presets in there that comes with them as well. So again, it's just all in terms of convenience. The thing that I with this coming back to this flash thing is And like the brightness, like you asked the question there about the brightness, how bright are they, Jake? How do they compare and that sort of thing? And that is the question that I get asked the most, and that is the thing that I'm most concerned about as well, is the brightness. But these are getting brighter all the time. Like Rotolight have just brought these out at 25% brighter than they were last year. Like they're getting brighter all the time. But you have to remember that our cameras are becoming better and better and better all the time as well. And I find it interesting that young people coming out of art college and stuff now, like their perception of ISO is completely different to yours and mine. Like for us, if like back then, if we're shooting at 200 ISO or like 400 ISO, it's like, whoa, gee, come on, that's, no way. Whereas like young people now, they just don't even, what's wrong with that? What do you mean? What would possibly be wrong with 200, 400, 800 ISO? Because the cameras are so good, they're coming at it from a different angle. So I think the sensitivity and quality of these cameras is getting better all the time, and these LEDs are getting brighter all the time as well. So I do think that we're getting to this sort of meet in the middle point. And with these LEDs flashing like this, I'd be amazed if all LEDs weren't flashing in 5 years' time. I just think this opens up so many possibilities to do everything that the strobes could, bar the power, but just with so much convenience, especially if you're shooting with a mirrorless camera. I mean, like you guys who are shooting with mirrorless with the EVF, I mean, like you're borderline cheating, right? Like it doesn't get any easier than that. With an ambient light, what you see is what you get, and the EVF is telling you like you've got aim assist on. Like it's just crazy. Like it doesn't get any easier.
It is. I mean, it's a comedy of capabilities that we have, right? So
it's never been a better time, for sure.
I'm curious. So the level that you're working at, Jake, and looking at your work, right? You've been doing this for 20 plus years. You know what you're doing, and you're at a level where now you're in the weeds, right? And you can figure all this stuff out.
It's true. It's true.
So for the photographers that aren't quite there yet, or maybe in a slightly different dimension with the kind of work that they produce, maybe you're producing like your traditional headshot on a white background, or they're doing the portrait shoots or the wedding engagement shoots and those sorts of things. Can this type of lighting help take their work to the next level? Should those folks stick with strobe? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I suppose the follow-up question for that is, would your client notice the difference?
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, it's all about the client.
I mean, look, if I would like to call myself an artist before I call myself a photographer in this day and age. And I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there, where you're like, Jake, you're getting into the weeds a bit here with the quality of light and all that sort of thing. And absolutely, I am definitely looking at that quality of light and really, wow. I mean, I can instantly see the difference. But would somebody starting out see it? No, maybe not. But I do think that it will make my life easier for sure. So and if if it makes my life easier, then maybe I can include a few more sets during the shoot, and then more sets equals more money in terms of more images. So I could see that being a benefit for sure.
Yeah, and you're right. It is just it's an embarrassment of capability. You know, if you have a late model mirrorless camera that can shoot up to, like, you know, who knows, 15,000 whatever ISO with still very low noise, right? And
Crazy,
then
right? Like
WYSIWYG
compared to where we came from with film, it's nuts.
with film, yeah, where it was 60th of a second, you know, ISO 100, 200 if you're a wild man, right?
If you were crazy, right? Yeah. I mean,
100
and
and
black and white later.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, now you're shooting these ridiculously high ISOs. You can see what you're getting on the back of the camera. The camera is focusing on the nearest eye automatically, and you're just playing and having fun, right? So, yeah. So what about power, though? So LEDs are notorious for, you know, sipping power, low power consumption. I would imagine, especially as opposed to a strobe. If you're on location somewhere, is there for the LED lights that you're using, is there a portable battery pack for them? Are they rechargeable? How does that piece work?
Yeah. I mean, if you're curious, I've got one here. I can hold it up if you want.
Yeah, grab it.
Yeah. So this is the Rotolight AOS 2. So that's the size of it there, and you know, this is upside down at the moment, but you can see you've got the screen on the back there. Yeah. So you've got the LED screen on there, and then so you just plug that in. The other thing I love about these is how lightweight they are. So I can hang this over a model without any worry at all. They just weigh absolutely next to nothing, and then you just have the big battery that's, you know. Like
okay, so there's a battery. Yeah.
In thing. Yeah.
Is that going to last you all day? The battery that you slap on there?
I mean, if you're going to be using it as a flash, I mean, it'll last you for days. Yeah, but if you're going to have it on full power, you know, in ambient mode, no, probably like an hour or so. This one's run out. I don't have a charger for this, but you're right. If you're going to have it on like full power all day, I don't know, but I mean, probably a couple of hours or something like that. But you can get bigger batteries. But for the most part, if I'm honest, I plug mine in unless I'm outside. I just plug them in. One thing, it's just because you don't have all that weight up there on the head, so just plugging them in, they're just super lightweight.
Right. And then as far as modifiers on that, so that one it looked like a kind of a frosted, you know, translucent
dome thing on there.
Yeah. Is that all you're using, or are you using a modifier on top of it to have more control over the light?
Good question. Yeah, good question. And that is the flip side of this collimating light thing that I was talking about earlier on, right? I was saying about, it's great we have this big panel and we can, you know, get this beautiful quality of light. The flip side of that is very difficult to modify into like a hard light, right? Because we can't use like a grid or like get it into a nice spot or anything like that. You would need something different to do that, which I have. I have a like a Godox SZ150R. Basically, it takes S-fit modifiers, you know, like the Bowens modifiers, so you can just plug whatever you want into that. But it's an LED. But again, like the power of that is not ideal. So yes, to your point about modifiers, beautiful quality of light on the panel, but difficult to modify to I just want a little bit on the hair here or something like that. And you can do it with barn doors and that sort of thing, but certainly not as easy. So it's really suited to that sort of beauty portrait style shots. But if you want to get, you know, fine tune the light into this, you know, gobos and that sort of stuff, then I don't think you could do it. I mean, they've come up with like attachments that you can use soft boxes and stuff on them, but that's just making a soft light softer. I haven't tried it myself, but again, you're just taking it from soft to softer. So I don't know if that's needed.
That's just a placebo for the photographers that think they need that, right? You need a softbox. Here you go.
Exactly. I know you've just spent a lot of money to get rid of that hotspot, but have it back.
Here you go. We're going to charge you to have it back, right? So, So when you're shooting, like in the process, right? So you have your model there. She's gone through hair and makeup, and she's on set and ready for you to do your thing. How are you? And you're using these Rotolight LEDs. Are you building the light with continuous light first, and then going into strobe mode, or like how does that happen?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I thought I was going to use them in the flash mode, but I mean, even though that flash gives you more power, if you're in a controlled environment, you know, and when I say controlled, it can be, even a slightly dark room is absolutely fine. So I just use them in ambient mode. Like, I'm just being lazy. Like, it's what you see is what you get. It's just, it's criminally easy. It really is.
So you switched to mirrorless. I think last time we talked, you were
I'm not mirrorless.
You're not mirrorless yet. You're still DSLR. Okay.
Yeah. I still have some morals.
Yeah, we'll check in with you next year, Jake.
Yeah, I know. It's so true. Yeah, it's so true. Because Sony was like, so you want to look at this? Or I was like, God, that is sharp. Yeah, like.
Yeah. You will be seduced to the dark side.
I know. Yeah, it's only so long that I can put it off, just because it's just so easy. It's like, you can just use this beautiful Helios lens with focus peaking, and get this gorgeous look that you've been chasing, like just really easily with this focus peaking on the back of the camera. It's like, oh my God, that's so easy. I know, yeah. Oh. So I can only put off the mirrorless for so long.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And like I said, look, with the ambient lights and the EVF, and what you see is what you get. It is just. It's nuts. Like you honestly, it's simulating the Kelvin adjustments that you're doing in camera in front of you, like. Yeah. I mean,
but on the other hand, we joke about the you're going to switch to mirrorless thing. On the other hand, the body of work speaks for itself. So, like, why switch if you're already getting what you need out of it? So, for the sake of switching. So I don't know.
Yeah, look, I would always spend my money on lighting over the camera. I really do think that it is the lighting is doing 90% of the image over the camera. That's like touching it up a little bit. It's not it's not what defines an image at all for me. And I think that this technology can sometimes get in the way of that a little bit. Like, here's a story. So I told you I used to work in a studio, right? And I was at the end of that, I was managing the studio and training the new guys and girls coming in. They'd be, they come out of art college, like super keen. They come in for all right, Jake, take me to the studio. I'm good to go, and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, sure. But just before you go, can I just get you just to write down on this bit of paper here what, like, just name the 3 things that you think make a perfect photograph, like the perfect image, please. And like they would say, in focus, right, correctly exposed, white balance, that sort of stuff, rule of thirds, composition, all that sort of stuff. And okay, I was like, cool, right, okay. So now what I want you to do is I want you to go away for an hour and just find 20 images that you think are the best 20 images you've ever seen in your entire life, the best photographs that have ever been taken by humans, and bring them to me. And they bring me these 20 images, and I would go, looking at these images, is the first thing that comes to your mind, wow, that's in focus, wow, that's correctly exposed, and wow, I love the white balance on that. Like, it's not. Like, these things that these cameras are doing for us is just the entry ticket. Like, that's not what photography is about. Like, what the soul of these images that you're drawn to, some of these phenomenal images, that's not the first thing you think about. Oh yeah, I love how sharp that is. It's bullshit. It's not. It's got nothing to do with it. So I think we can allow the technology to get in the way sometimes, and I think it's nice to kind of step back and and just, like, for me, like the lighting and trying to show that character and tell a story with that lighting is definitely what drives me, not the fact that I've got 11 stops of dynamic range or some madness.
But isn't it interesting though how we're I don't know, I don't fault the camera companies, they have to stay in business, but we're seduced into, you need this next camera, you need this, you got the Nikon Z6 II, you need the Z9 now because it does all this amazing stuff. Meanwhile, Jake is producing all this other stuff with a camera with a crank on the side.
Yeah. Many years ago, I shot a video tutorial, and I was using like a Nikon D610 or something like that. And the guys at the time were like, "Wait, you're going to use that? Like, what have you been using to take your pictures so far?" "I've been using this." "You managed to get those pictures with this camera?" Like, what do you think? Like, yeah, like, it's not the camera, you bloody idiots. Yeah, like, But no, you're right. I think camera manufacturers have done a really good job with their marketing of that, and we've been encouraged to, sort of buy these pieces of kit under the guise of, like, they're going to make make your images better. And like, I think it depends on what you define as better. If you mean more in focus, then yeah, your images are better. But it does always surprise me, when we talk about pricing, and like somebody won't think twice about spending $2,000 on a lens or getting the latest, like the camera 18 months after they just bought a previous camera. But when you say, oh, this strobe is 500 quid, they're like, whoa, yeah, no way, man, it's way too expensive. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know where that dissonance comes from, right? I don't know why that happens.
You're charging me for light? The sun's right there. Light's free. You should be free, right?
Spend all this money on this camera. I got nothing left over for lights.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just find it weird. I don't know why it's got like that, because you hit the nail on the head. Like these camera manufacturers have got to stay in market. I mean, Fuji are bringing out a camera every 10 minutes. I don't know how they're doing it, but like it's because they keep buying them, right? I mean,
and it's I think part of it's fashion. It's like, hey, bragging rights. Oh, you're shooting with this thing. I just got the new this thing, and it's obviously better, right?
Yeah. I mean, a million years ago when I was sponsored by Bowens, one of the reasons I think they went out of business was because they made a product that lasted 20 years. Like, I bought 4 strobes when I left art college in like 2000, and I was still using them like 20 years later, in some shoots. That's not how to make a successful business, guys.
No, come on, product designers, you got a built-in obsolescence, right?
Exactly right, which is easier to do with camera tech. And this is the thing, like I said, this video tutorial that I made years ago, I mean, it's still valid today because light is still traveling in a straight line and at the same speed. Like, that's not going to change anytime soon. Yeah?
Not that we know of, no. You know what? The other piece of this, the other equation, I know the audiences want me to ask this, but the post-processing side of the equation, right? So you obviously obsess about light and color and all that, and you're meticulous about it, and you create this image, this raw file that you then take into software to finish it. Right. So what, we don't need a whole tutorial on Jake's post-processing workflow, but like generally speaking, what are you doing to the image? Are you using any plugins like portraiture for skin smoothing or frequency separations, or like what kind of Jake Hicks magic are you putting in there?
Wow, it's showing your age with those terms, Frederick. That's crazy.
Hey, I'll be 30 next month, man. Just saying.
As my wife says, black don't crack, man. I don't know how you do it.
It does not. Yeah. You have no idea.
So no, it's a really good question, and obviously I do a lot with my images, but I think you have to remember that when I'm taking my image, I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm going to be doing post-pro, right? So I'm shooting for the final image, not necessarily just for the raw. So what I mean by that is, in camera, I may shoot my images slightly flatter. So what I mean by that is, like the shadows are not going to be black and the highlights are not going to be blown out. It's going to be reduced contrast in camera. So I'll add some extra fill lights here and there and that sort of thing. And the reason for that is because when I get into Photoshop and Lightroom and that sort of thing, and I want to crank the contrast, if I'm already shooting fairly contrasty in camera, then I can't do that in post because I'll just start to clip the data, right? So the other thing with color is, and you'll know this from Photoshop, whenever you increase the contrast, you simultaneously increase the saturation. Like, the two are always linked, so you can't increase one without the other. So one of the ways I get some of the colors that I get is I'm shooting a little bit flatter in camera, so like a lot of data in the shadows, and then cranking it in post, and I'm able to crank it in terms of contrast to bring up those colors and saturation without clipping the data. But you can only do that if you shoot for the final image in mind. I'm not shooting for the raw. The raw is halfway. I'm shooting for the final image.
Interesting. So what you described sounds like with cinematographers, they shoot in log, right, which produces not low resolution, but unsaturated, low contrast version of the image, and then they color grade it to perfection. So that's basically what you're doing, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. Which is, again, easier than it's ever been. Like I said, with some of these cameras, like 11 stops of latitude, compared to, like, you remember shooting slide film or E6, it was like 1 stop, or like,
No, it was plus or minus a third of a stop, Jake.
Wow. Yeah. But you see, this is why slide film looks so good, because it was so contrasty, because it had that lack of latitude, so you had that saturation. So like, people talk about, you're doing post-pro and that sort of stuff. Yeah, but we used film in the past to to get the look that we wanted. Like if we wanted really saturated images, you'd use that E6 to get that contrast and saturation because it had no latitude. So it's the same thing that we're doing now. We're just really trying to emulate that look to a certain extent.
So if people want to learn from you and get more sort of, exposed to the Jake way of lighting and color science and all of the things, how do they do that? How do they, do they follow you? Like, what's the best way?
Yeah, there's loads of places. I mean, call me old school, but I'm very active on Facebook still. So my page on there, Jake Hicks Photography on there. I post every day on there, and the reason I use Facebook is just because I'm able to do these rants that you're witnessing here about about my philosophies behind images and that sort of thing. So I'll talk about my images and have chats about the community and stuff there. And you can't do that anywhere else, really, in my opinion. So I think it's great for that. The main place though is going to be my website. So basically, all roads lead from there, if you will. There's literally hundreds of free techniques on there. If you wanted to start playing with color gels, there's loads of free lighting techniques on there, just under my techniques tab. Just go in there. I've been posting for nearly 10 years now, these Technique Tuesdays. So there is tons and tons of free stuff in there. And if people want to take it further, then since obviously lockdown, I've been doing a lot of online workshops with people from all over the world. So that's what's been keeping me busy during those years, and it's been great to see them still carry on after lockdown as well. So I've always doing online workshops with people. So so if people want to take it further and get even deeper into the lighting techniques and that sort of thing, there's plenty to look at on my site for sure.
I love that. Yeah. It's so interesting. And yeah, definitely jakehicksphotography.com. Definitely go over there and absorb all you can. It's there. I come into contact with many kinds of photographers, right? From the beginner all the way through to the seasoned pro. And very seldom in that group of thousands of photographers that I speak to are the ones that take it to that level, like below the epidermis, right? Just like they want to understand how all the little bits work. Some photographers are like, you know what? I don't use a light meter. I just go in there and I wing it and it looks great and I fix it in post and people pay me and they create fantastic work. I mean, it looks great, but the process, I think part of it is, and you correct me if you feel this way or if you don't feel this way, but on one hand, it's the finished piece and people looking at it and enjoying it, obviously, and the subject or the customer feeling like, yeah, this is what I wanted. But the process or the road to get to that point, I would argue, is equally important for the nourishment of the photographer's soul, right? So if you feel like, yeah, I feel like I look at that transition of that color to this color on that arm that nobody would see or even appreciate, but you see it. In my mind. Yeah, you see it and you cannot let that go with it not perfect. Right? Do you feel that way? It's like you get in
absolutely.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, and this is what I mean. I am being a little bit cheeky, when I said that I'd rather be called an artist than a photographer in this day and age. But sadly, I do think that it is about understanding, what makes a great image in your eyes. And that little example that I gave you of what I do with the new guys coming into the studio, of like going away and finding 20 images that really speak to you. Like nobody's 20 images are going to be the same, right? Everybody's 20 images are going to be completely unique to you and you alone. And what's kind of interesting about that is within those 20 images is really your style of what you like. Because what you like in other images, if you start to implement that into your own work, big shock, you're going to be, you're going to love more of the images that you take. But I think we need to be more cognitive with that. So that, do that example that I did, maybe do it once every 6 months, once every year and that sort of thing, really, really stop and think about what you enjoy about images. And, because it's not about them being, in focus and correctly exposed. It really is about, I really like the fact that that's got a lot of dynamic poses, or this uses really bold primary colors, or the fact that the photographer is always down low using a slightly wider angle lens. Now, you might not know this, but these are the images that you're being drawn to subconsciously. So, look at those shots and then extract those elements and start putting it into your own shots, rather than getting too bogged down with the technicals. Just do something like that, and that can change your work hugely, very, very quickly, and start to bring out some of that personal style that we all have as well.
One thing I want to end on is just the looking just on your website and looking through the images that you have listed on the front there. Like I said at the beginning, it occurs to me that you understand and obsess about light. Post-processing is spot on, right? Everything just looks flawless and meticulous. But then the other piece of it is your posing, right? And of course, there's beautiful people, so there's that. But it helps. Yeah, but the posing and the poses that you implement, and then sort of I can see some of the experimentation, like dragging the shutter and doing those sorts of things in there. Where do the poses come from? Like, how is it just you just naturally know? Yeah, I want this person to, or I want to accentuate this part of the body. So is that just time, or is there some trick? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, it's I think that all things have a little bit of a cheat sheet, right? So I think you can start off with cheat sheets like if a model's standing, get her to put her weight on one foot so that it pops out one of the hips, bring one of the feet forward, or if she's got her hands on her hips, like rather than her hands being like that, just get her to flip her hands around and hands like that, so you don't have these bunch of fingers like that. So there's tons of cheat sheets, as it were, with regards to posing. Working with professional models is going to elevate your portfolio hugely, right? Because that's their job, like that especially if it's like a model who's experienced. And really what I'm doing is, for my part, I'm coming quite low in terms of the shot. So for 90% of the images that you see on my website, for example, I'm sat on the floor taking those shots. So I'm making sure that model is very empowered in the shot. Like I'm or the viewer looking at these images is really looking up at this subject, and then maybe shoot slightly wider as well, and then get some of the limbs coming towards you. So you can start to play around with that, and it is something that will come to you over time. But if you are looking to get instantly better images, then working with professional models is a very easy win for you, for sure. Yeah.
Love it. If I was to look in your Lightroom catalog right now and sort by the most used focal length, what would be at the top?
Interesting. 58 mil.
58. Wow.
Yeah.
58 on a full frame body.
And I don't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I own a 58 mil. That's what's weirder about that. Yeah.
What? Yeah, you're zooming to 58.
Yeah, and I'm doing that subconsciously as well, as to what looks right to me. Yeah, because it's funny you say that, because I only did this a while ago now, but yeah, I actually did exactly what you said. I filtered in Lightroom to see what sort of focal length, and it was vastly the most popular focal length was about 58 mil. And again, if I'm sat on the floor looking up at a human body, as it were, that is kind of like I'm using that distortion of 58 mil to my advantage. Yeah, so it's actually making them appear taller in the shot.
I love that. So I'm guessing 24-70 rack to 58 is where you're.
Yeah. I'm super lazy. I don't take that 24-70 off, even though I promise I'm going to do it. I never do. Yeah.
just super glue it on there. Just leave it.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, that's great, man. Thank you for being so open about sharing what you're doing. It's refreshing to see the body of work. It's fantastic, and how open you are with training and explaining and spreading the word. About gels and lighting and not being afraid of color and all the things. You said a number of things that resonated with me. I was taking notes, as I bet a bunch of people listening to and watching this were. Gray is bad. the gray background. Yeah. So from this point forward, I have a gray background in the studio in the other room. So from this point forward, I'm going to be thinking about that analogy of watercolor on the gray background.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Soft boxes are not necessarily the end all be all for a great portrait. right?
Yeah,
So
test it yourself.
beauty
Just like
dishes.
shoot your softbox at a white wall and take a shot, and you'll see that it's an instant gradient, which is not good for lighting on the skin. It's just not. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, you say that, but then the beauty dish is going to do the same thing, right? If I aim a beauty dish at the wall,
it doesn't. Yeah, because it's got that curve. So the light hits that diffusion cone, and that cone then spreads that light out. Yeah.
Hey, you're going to put me on Amazon.
I've got images to I can show you. Trust me.
I believe it. So go get yourself a beauty dish or a cheap $6 umbrella, and you're good to go.
22-inch beauty dish. Yeah, 22-inch beauty dish. Like that's really the prime size you need, especially for portraits, headshots, that sort of thing, corporate and that sort of thing. And then distance wise, you can't just use a beauty dish anywhere. You really want that beauty dish to be like arm's distance away from your subject, and then you'll just watch that beautiful drop off of light, and it absolutely, I promise you'll instantly see it, gorgeous drop off of light. Yeah. And that's because that beauty dish is that size, arm's reach away, boom. Can't go wrong.
Wow. And the LED lights you're using are from Rotolight, right? Correct? Rotolight.
Yeah, so they're the Rotolights. Yeah, and they're the EOS 2. So they just brought out the EOS 2 Pros, which are on Kickstarter or whatever it is at the moment that they've got, and so they're cheaper on there at the moment. But and they do have the Neos, which are the little ones. And I'll just mention this: if you can try and save up to get the bigger ones. The reason I say that is because as soon as we get down to that smaller size, we kind of lose this whole quality of light thing that I was just talking about. Right. Absolutely. I mean, I've got one for like a background light or a hair light, but I would never use it as my key light. So if you can, if you're thinking about getting them, just try and save up a little bit more to get the larger panel size, and you'll see a huge difference. Yeah, huge difference. Yeah.
Relatively speaking, right? You get the small ones if you're shooting small product photography or things like that, because it's all about the subject. Or if you're like
at a wedding, right? Something like that. You want something lightweight, boom, perfect. Yeah.
Jake, fantastic again. When are you in the States again, man? We got to hang out. When are you back?
I know. I am actually in the process of trying to organize workshops in the US for April next year. But fingers crossed, we'll see, man.
Yeah, do that.
It's been too long.
Me know. Yeah. Let me know. I know some people at some companies that might be able to help out with that. So
interesting. Yeah. I think the last time I was in the US is when I saw you in Puerto Rico, which is crazy. It's been a long time. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they've had at least 2 or 3 hurricanes since the last time we hung out there.
I bet, bless them. Yeah, I bet, bless them.
Yeah. It's craziness. All right, Jake, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, pleasure.
Fantastic. You've spent some of my money and saved me a lot of money, because I'm definitely I've got umbrellas in the garage over there. I'm like, umbrellas.
Everybody, I was the same.
That's for noobs, Softbox is so true.
I had umbrellas up in the attic. I had to bring them down. It's just, I know. Yeah, everybody did it. Yeah.
So crazy.
And don't be fooled by those 200 quid umbrellas from certain lighting brands. It's an umbrella. There is no technology in it. The $6 one from eBay is absolutely fine.
And use that. And you're reflecting. You're bouncing the light. You're not shooting through. Correct?
Never, ever shoot through an umbrella.
Oh, look at that.
So you thought softboxes were bad? Shoot through umbrellas.
Because there's those umbrellas where you shoot through them, but you put the back silver kind of cover on them. You remember those?
Oh, okay, yeah. If at least do that, but you may as well just use a softbox, which as we've just found out is bad. So
it is a softbox,
those people who shoot through an umbrella and then don't have a back on is that's just doubly bad. So you've got the hot spot, and then you've just got all this light firing backwards into your set, just bouncing around. So never use that. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So
lastly on umbrellas, then silver is what I use, because silver is going to give you more contrast in the light, and like we've said before, more contrast means more saturation. So if you're looking to use colored lighting, use the silver. If you want more flattering, then just go for the white.
Yeah. I got notes. You're spending my money, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, we'll have to catch up again. Let me know when you're going to be in town, and we'll work some magic to help promote that thing, and maybe I'll show up too. That'd be great.
Wow, imagine. Yeah. Are you still doing that image feedback on TWiP thing? Are you still doing those?
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to come on and do one?
Give me a shout, man. Yeah, I'm happy to do that again. That was fun. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. Done. You're on the hook now.
As long as we ban black and white images. I'm happy to do that, yeah.
Good luck with that. Okay. All right. We'll end that right now. I got to run. You know what's happening here. We got contractors running around. So I'll leave it right there. Jake Hicks, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. See you again, Frederick. Take care.
This is TWiP.